news stories about Israel and Palestine for years and years as a young person growing up. My father was a U.S. Naval officer, so I was always very conscious of military conflicts because there was always the possibility that perhaps it could directly affect my family. And so it was always something on my mind, always something I paid attention to. And by the time the Intifada starting in the 2000s, I was able to sort of reach out to people who were more connected to the issue and get a more direct sense of some of the dynamics. And certainly as well as reading a lot of the great books that were out. I think Noam Chomsky's Fateful Triangle was a very influential work. Not so much for his position on the issue per se, but in the way he sort of exposed the bias that exists to this day in the media and amongst, particularly the American government. I can't speak to the Canadian government as well as Hannah can, but I'm sure there's similar dynamics. But it became very clear to me that with Palestine, it was a very sort of one-sided affair where you had a particular, call it a political, call it an ethnic community that was essentially disempowered entirely in their fate by Israel, by America, and by sort of their international sort of collaborators in Canada and Europe. So it felt very natural to go there and to travel and to witness what was going on. I went to some presentations by other ISM members and was very impressed with their work, and decided to take it upon myself to go there. I mean, certainly it was I didn't just sort of buy a ticket one day and show up. I reached out to all the members of the community I could to support me in that endeavor, and they did. They responded very positively. And it was a very powerful experience to go over there. And I went over there because, to me, as an American citizen, I think by and large, the American government is certainly not the only complicit party in what is going on in Israel, Palestine, however you want to name it. But they certainly have a very direct role, probably more responsible than anyone else. They are on the forefront. They are the vetoes in the UN, their official statements. They're essentially the bridge between Palestine and the world in what holds progress back. And so I felt it was very much, as a representative, essentially, of the United States government, it was what they call in political science a sort of act of public diplomacy, where when your government fails to sort of represent your views, it's entirely natural for you to take it upon yourself as a citizen, as a sort of representative of your own country, republic, or whatever, to take matters into your own hands and to try to provide information and education to the public in a way that the established institutions do not. And so that was the mission. That was the mission of the International Solidarity Movement. It was a movement of people willing and able, because not everyone is able to do something like go to Palestine and witness tanks running around, things like that. And it's not everyone's duty to do that. There's obviously a range of things people can do in those situations. But for me, it was the choice, and I felt very comfortable with it, and did up until the moment where I was targeted by the Israelis. It was a very immensely powerful experience being there. The sort of welcome that the Palestinian community gave to us, to me, was very inspiring. It really was. And I sort of went there on an open-ended timetable and ended up staying there for 3 months. And it was a very humbling experience, a very powerful experience, a very dark experience. It was a very terrible life for the people living there, for the people growing up there. The everyone had a story of watching a friend, a relative, being shot, being killed by the Israelis. It was just a terrible situation. And I felt very, justified in going over there and doing that. And so naturally, at the time, the Israeli government was not pleased with the international solidarity movement. They openly said so in the media, that we were essentially an obstacle, that we had to be removed, sort of leaving it open to, and if the military government is speaking it in public in that sense, they're speaking it amongst themselves, the military, the officers, the soldiers, certainly in a more direct sense. And after that, it became clear, after Rachel was killed, after I was shot, a British citizen, Tom Herndl, was shot shortly thereafter. Another British citizen, James Miller, a cameraman, was shot and killed shortly thereafter. There was a sort of spate of violent shootings / killings, and it became very clear that the Israelis were willing to pretty much take the gloves off and consider anyone who showed solidarity with the Palestinian people, that they would be treated likewise, that they would be treated accordingly, that the sort of savagery that they had up until then pretty much solely reserved for the local residents would be extended to anyone who joined the local residents to sort of witness their life and try to broadcast that to the outside world. And so that's what happened. It was a direct shooting. It was an intent to kill. I spent 3 months in an Israeli hospital, spent 8 years in and out of an American hospital getting everything repaired. And the Israeli government has certainly they continued thereafter to step up their efforts to prevent people from entering Palestine and witnessing. They became very aggressive about deportations, and just very aggressive in general about essentially censoring the day-to-day life of the Palestinian population out of the public eye. And certainly the US government and the US media, and to a larger extent the international government media community,